So you say Norfolk, right? Instead of like Norfolk. But then folklore. So is it actually the Norfolk Folklore Society? Is that how you pronounce it? Welcome, stranger, to Madame Strangeways, where I, Madame Strangeways, narrate your true strange stories of the unexplained. Whether you're a skeptic, a believer, or some secret third thing, stick around after the story where I share my strange thoughts and strange research about said strange story, and along the way, I will drag you down a slew of strange rabbit holes, kicking and screaming if needs must. Before we get to today's true strange story, though, the strangest of shoutouts to my Patreon patrons: TJ Hodder of the Tapes of Trepidation podcast, Gmanmusic, Ted, Keith, and Tori. Thank you so much to my feral fiendish five for supporting the show. You can hear your name at the beginning of every episode too, just for joining the Patreon at patreon.com/madamestrangeways. Oh, was that incredibly realistic thunder I just heard? Pretty sure it's about to rain hellcats and hellhounds out there. So you know what that means. Settle in for a true strange story. Here, with Madame Strangeways. The Old Abandoned Cabin by Kaycee. My friend and I were bored and just driving around. We were on a rural road close to my house. We saw what looked like a road and not a driveway and turned down it. At the end was an old abandoned-looking cabin. We were teenagers and kind of naughty, so we planned to go peek in the windows. We got out and we both got the weirdest feeling. Neither one of us could explain the feeling, but we scared ourselves and left. The next day, we were doing the same thing, out driving around, and decided to check the cabin out again. Apparently, we were the type of people who would die first in a horror movie. Only problem was, we could not find the road we turned down. The road from start to finish was maybe 10 miles. We thought we knew where it was. We were just there the day before, and it was a road we were both very familiar with. The road we turned off of, not the cabin road. We assumed we somehow missed it. We turned around and still couldn't find it. We searched many days for it and could never find it again. Eventually, one weekend, we decided we'd turn down every road and driveway. The cabin had to be at the end of one of them, but we could never find it again. I can't explain it. Even still, there has to be a logical explanation, but I haven't been able to figure it out. Kaycee, thank you so much for allowing me to share your story on the show. I've never had anything happen to me like that. However, what I love about the story is that I can feel the vibe of the story. Like I can put myself in a time when I was younger and my, like late teens. Your friends have cars, y'all are bored, you just get in the car and you just drive around. And gas was cheaper then. So it was okay. You could just drive around, waste gas, listen to the radio, look for trouble. And I can just totally put myself in y'all's position in this story, which is why part of the reason why I liked it so much. The other part of the reason is, okay, it's pretty scary. Like, I feel like, what do you mean? Like, it's gone. I do love a disappearing location story. It's just, even if it's not a paranormal explanation, even if it is just a matter of getting turned around and being convinced that you know where it is. And it actually, even if that aside, it's still in the moment when it's happening to you. It's so scary, especially when there's two of you, because then now you're like, I swear, you're looking at them like, I'm not crazy, right? And they're like, no, you're not crazy. It was definitely over here. And then you're both kind of getting each other riled up and you're both scared. And then, like, get out of there. Like, for instance, y'all didn't even get a chance to even look in the window because you were so scared. You got to get out of there. You didn't even get a chance to see what's inside. What's inside? We'll never know. I wish you had gotten a chance to go look in the window because I would love to have known. Like, was it like, like an old timey, 1800s cabin, and it's like, it's misplaced in time, or is it like a modern cabin and there was just actually some scary person that was living out in the middle of the woods? Actually, that sounds really nice. I don't know if they're scary, but someone's out in the middle of the woods and they're living there, and then y'all try to go find them and then it's just gone. Where did it go? Like I said, it doesn't even matter what the explanation is for why it's not there. Whether or not you just lost it, you got lost, turned around, couldn't find it again. Doesn't matter. It was scary in the moment. That is what's exciting. And I've been kind of thinking about this more and more because, like, for instance, first of all, hello. First of all, welcome. Welcome. I'm glad to have all of you here. Are you a new listener? I'm so happy to have you. Thank you for listening. Welcome to the show. Are you a regular listener? So happy to have you. I so appreciate you. Thank you. But I've been thinking about this a lot because, over Strangetober, I was watching a lot more scary movies than usual. And one of the things that I kind of kept realizing over and over is that, like, I am chasing the high of a previous scare. And I've come to the unfortunate conclusion that I just don't think it's ever going to happen again. For me, that scare that will never be topped was the Blair Witch Project. Because I saw it as a teenager when it came out. I fully believed everything about it. I ate up every little drop of lies that they fed us about how true it was, that this is actually based on a true story. I totally believed it. And so it was very traumatizing for me. The event was very traumatizing. And I remember afterwards just being like, oh my God, this happened. This really happened. And I'm living in a world in which this happened. And I don't even remember when I found out that it was real. Anyway, that's not the point of the episode. I'm just telling you, I'm never going to ever feel that same fear again because I thought it was true. And that's just not going to happen again with another horror story. There would have to be like a Truman Show level. Like, I would have to be Truman. Madame Strangeways would have to be the situation. And there would have to just be a lot of things that, or like, I guess if I got amnesia, maybe if I got amnesia, and I thought it was 1999 again, and then you showed me the Blair Witch Project, maybe then I could feel the same amount of fear. But otherwise, I'm not going to ever, it's never going to happen again. So the reason I'm saying this, hi, we're still here talking about this disappearing house. The reason I'm saying this, the reason I'm on this little rabbit hole that I'm taking you down, is because the part of the story that was so scary to me was putting myself in my shoes when I was like 17, and if this had happened to me, and how absolutely scary it would be. So that's really why I was drawn to this story. And I also thought it would give me an opportunity to talk about a couple things. Number one being that if you're listening to this and you have listened to other scary story podcasts, or you're kind of like involved in spooky stuff online, you may have heard of a glitch in the Matrix. And if you have heard of a glitch in the Matrix, and if you're a regular listener, you may have noticed that I have not featured any glitch in the Matrix stories. I'll tell you why in a moment, but first we're going to talk about what is a glitch in the Matrix for those who do not know. Now, you may have seen the movie The Matrix, in which there is a reference to a glitch in the Matrix. So they're in the Matrix, being cool Matrix goers. I don't actually remember what their titles are. So they're in the Matrix and they see this black cat walk by, and then they see the exact same thing happen again. And that's when they know, there's a glitch in the Matrix, which means Elrond is here. Mr. Smith, that's his name, is here. And he's the bad guy. So we got to go. We got to get or we're gonna get killed. So we got to go. But they know because there's been a glitch in the matrix. That's their sign that like something has changed in the matrix. So that's where the phrase comes from. And so now, for instance, if you were driving around and you found a cabin and then you knew where it was, and then the next day you went back and the cabin was gone, you might classify that as a glitch in the matrix story. Or some glitch in the matrix stories are like, I only owned this one t-shirt, this one version of a t-shirt with this one design on it. And I did the laundry the other day and there's 2 shirts now and it multiplied and I only ever owned one. I know I definitely never owned 2 of this shirt, but now I have 2 of this shirt. Other people will define that as a glitch in the matrix. I am not here to yuck anyone's yum. I just want to be really clear. However, because part of Madame Strangeways is kind of rooted in, like a small percentage of like mental health, and wanting to remind you, you can be afraid and not be in danger. So you can hear a scary story about demons, but that doesn't mean the demons are going to come and get you. Like this is what I'm trying to kind of remind people. But, also I do talk about my own mental health issues occasionally here and there and kind of like what has led me down this path. So that being said, keeping that in mind, I don't love the idea of platforming glitch in the matrix stories because I think so many stories are just our memories being fallible, but we're ascribing something to an infallible memory. We're saying our memories are infallible. My memory is perfect, and I remember perfectly that I only had one version of this shirt, and it really spooked me, and it scared me. And the only way that I can possibly explain why I would have to, because I am so confident that my memory is right, the only thing that can possibly explain this is that we are living in a simulation, and there has been a glitch in the matrix, and this matrix, whatever it is, has spawned a second shirt. Oops, accidentally, a glitch in the code. You see, that's the problem I have, is that our brains and our memories are so fallible. They are scarily fallible. The scariest part of all of the glitch in the matrix stories that I've ever heard is how everyone is so overconfident in their memories. So that's why I have an issue with glitch in the matrix stories. I don't have a problem listening to them. I do listen to them, but I'm not going to platform them by that name. Okay. But I do think that someone else, most spooky people would probably categorize this as a glitch in the matrix, but I disagree. And we're going to talk about it. So this is the part of the show where I say how you could explain the things in this story, either through a mundane or a naturalistic or a skeptic view versus a paranormal view. So I'm going to start with the mundane / naturalistic / skeptic explanation just right out the bat, because we've got some really interesting paranormal and folklore stuff to get through. Okay, so starting with the mundane explanation, I think the easiest one, which I am not saying one way or the other what happened. I'm just saying these are the possibilities. Okay. Just to be clear, it's possible. I think this is the simplest explanation. This may be the Occam's razor explanation, which is that the explanation with the fewest amount of assumptions basically is generally correct. So the Occam's razor explanation would just simply be that Kaycee and their friend just got turned around. Just forgot where they were going, or, just got turned around. They were there at night. Now they're there in the day. Maybe there used to be a light at the edge of the street and it went out, or maybe the owners of the cabin saw a car come up and they didn't like having visitors there because they didn't intend to have visitors. So maybe they, hid the entrance from the street. Maybe they put up, I don't know, camouflage. Maybe they put up a bunch of tree branches so that you couldn't recognize the entrance. I don't know. We'll never know what happened, but I think that is the Occam's razor, is that they either missed the entrance or the entrance was intentionally hidden from them so that they wouldn't find it again. Now, You could get creative. Here's the thing. With these skeptical explanations, you can get creative because it doesn't just mean that there was just some boring guy that lived there and he decided to hide the entrance. No. It can be something nefarious. It can be some evil, crazy hermit and he didn't want these kids meddling and he was doing some absolutely crazy, evil, occultist, something, etc., and he didn't want to be seen. So you can have fun with it. So I think that's the Occam's razor explanation. But here's the thing. I also understand, Kaycee said, no way. Like, we knew where it was. We knew this area. Kaycee, I believe you. And that's why it's so scary is when something like that happens, is you're telling yourself, I know. I am so confident that I know this area. I believe that you knew the area really well. However, I also know that our brains can not only just be fallible, but they can actually also be influenced not only by outside sources, but just for the sake of memory. You remember something, and this is true. Your brain rewrites the memory every time. So your brain is basically altering the memory every single time you access and remember a memory. So and again, I know I've said this so many times. If you've listened to the show before, hi. If you listened to the show before, you're probably sick of hearing me say this. Unfortunately, I'm going to continue to say it, which is that is the scariest part of some of these stories, is that you never know what memory is true. You think you are so confident, 100% confident in a memory you have, wrong. Your memory could be totally wrong. And here's something that I thought was really interesting I wanted to share with y'all, is the Lost in the Mall experiment. So this is a memory implantation technique. This is from Wikipedia. Used to demonstrate that confabulations about events that never took place, such as having been lost in a shopping mall as a child, can be created through suggestions made to experimental subjects that their older relative was present at the time. So it was first developed by Elizabeth Loftus, and she's going to come up again in a second too, I think, in another tab I've got open for you, as support for the thesis that it is possible to implant entirely false memories in people. Now, I'm not saying someone implanted a totally false memory in Kaycee. That is not what I'm saying. I'm just giving you an example of how easy it is to influence memories. Okay? But here, let me just tell you about this study really quick. Because if you're picturing like sci-fi, like wires and like brain waves and something like that, no, it's way simpler than that. It's scary easy to make these false memories. So here it is. Study methodology. The professor, Loftus, invited her students to design and execute an experiment implanting false memories in subjects. Cohn enlisted his mother, sister, and brother as subjects. He assembled booklets containing 4 short narratives describing childhood events and instructed them to try to remember as much as possible about each of the 4 events and to write down those details over the course of 6 days. Unknown to the participants, one of the narratives was false. It described Cohen's brother getting lost in a shopping mall at around the age of 5, then being rescued by an elderly person and reunited with his family. During the experiment, Cohen's brother unwittingly invented several additional details of the false narrative. When told that one of the narratives was false, Cohen's brother could not identify which one was false and expressed disbelief when told. In a follow-up experiment, Elizabeth Loftus and Jacqueline Pickrell adapted the methods Cohen had used on his brother in a formal study with 24 participants. Because if you were sitting there listening, were you sitting there listening and going, that's a really small sample size, and I don't think that sounds very scientific? Well, you are right. It wasn't. However, here we go. 24 participants, about 25% of whom reported remembering the false event. 5 out of the 24 participants failed to identify the Lost in the Mall event as the false event, and instead picked one of the true events to be false. So that's 5 out of 24. Okay? Still, it seems like that's not that many. I feel like it is. I feel like it is a lot to not know what was true in your memories. Okay. Goes on and says, Loftus calls this study existence proof for the phenomenon of false memory creation and suggests that the false memory is formed as a result of the suggested event, being lost in a mall, being incorporated into already existing memories of going to the mall, which you have a lot of if you at this time. Kids these days, this would have to be adapted for Gen Alpha because I don't think they're going to malls. Aren't malls dead? Didn't millennials kill them along with paper towels paper napkins? Now here's what I'll say. When I first heard about this, my first thought was, well, what if you were actually kind of lost in the mall for like as a kid, but you wasn't really lost. You just felt like you were lost. And then that is actually what you're remembering when you're thinking about this. Or maybe you were lost and your parents didn't even know. Maybe you were with another relative and the relative never told your parents that you were lost. I think it's definitely possible. So the study isn't perfect, but I do think that it's food for thought. Then on the subject of memory, we've got memory conformity. This is also Wikipedia. Memory conformity, also known as social contagion of memory, which that just sounds so cool. I'm so interested. Is the phenomenon where memories or information reported by others influences an individual and is incorporated into the individual's memory. It is one of many social influences on memory. Note many, because there are so many, and it's so scary to live in this body and have our brains just lie to us constantly, gaslighting us constantly. Like, no, you totally remember it right. You totally remember this memory right. You don't. Sometimes you do. Sometimes you don't. And you don't know which one is which. That's what's so scary. Another example occurred after the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing. 3 employees were working at the location where Timothy McVeigh rented the truck he used in the bombing. 2 of the witnesses originally thought that McVeigh was by himself, but the third believed that McVeigh came with an accomplice. After the 3 were left to discuss the event, the 2 witnesses came to the conclusion that there was indeed a second person who assisted McVeigh. The FBI believes that this accomplice never existed. The employee who claims to have seen an accomplice most likely unintentionally influenced the other 2 employees, causing them to make later claims about an accomplice as well. So you can kind of see how this might have something to do with this story. Did both of them actually see the cabin? Did only one of them see the cabin and then said, oh my God, did you see that cabin? It looked like XYZ. And then over time, now they both remember the cabin. So Kaycee, I want you to know, again, I really need you to know, if you're still listening, I am not saying this in a negative way. I am not trying to dog on you. I am just trying to say, if you were looking for a mundane or a skeptical explanation of what happened, here we go. I've actually got one more. The misinformation effect, everyone's favorite. The misinformation effect. I've never talked about it before. That's a joke. I don't know why I said that. The misinformation effect occurs when a person's recall of episodic memories becomes less accurate because of post-event information. The misinformation effect has been studied since the mid-1970s, when Elizabeth Loftus, I told you she'd be back, is one of the most influential researchers in the field. One theory is that original information and the misleading information that was presented after the fact become blended together. Another theory is that the misleading information overwrites the original information. Scientists suggest that because the misleading information is the most recent, it is more easily retrieved. I'm going to say that again. Because again, this is terrifying. Scientists suggest that because the misleading information is the most recent, it is more easily retrieved. Does this scare you as much as it scares me? Let me know, madamestrangeways@gmail.com. The misinformation effect is an example of retroactive interference, which occurs when information presented later interferes with the ability to retain previously encoded information. So I was telling you, kind of like, also every time you access a memory, you're overwriting it. Like, this is related. So that's from the mundane, naturalistic, etc., skeptical view. That's, I think, how you could explain that. If you've got a skeptical view that I have not thought of, I want to hear about it, madamestrangeways@gmail.com. However, we're going to move on to the more paranormal, or also, folkloric explanations to this. So first of all, starting off strong, we're in a simulation. We're in a simulation, and this is a glitch in the Matrix. Okay. I do remember seeing very recently, and I just pulled it up, apparently physics has proven, I don't know how, that we are not living in a simulation. I don't know how you prove that. And I imagine that if you believe in the simulation theory, that you are also thinking the same thing. So it says here, this is on holistic.news, the most trustworthy of sites. It says the latest research by physicists suggests that the answer is unambiguous. No, we are not living in a simulation. Mathematics and quantum physics show that our universe operates in a way that no computer simulation could ever replicate. I don't know how you prove that. I'm going to be honest. I don't know how you prove it. I personally don't think we're in a simulation. And let me tell you why I think that. And I've tried to put this into words. I've tried to explain my logic before. I can't. And at this point, I won't. But the reason that I don't think that we're in a simulation is that hoarder houses exist. I don't know how else to explain it. The geological levels of dust and dirt and all that stuff that can be packed into one house. I don't know. I don't know. I think dust and dirt and mold and stuff like that. I just feel like, to me, I'm like, that's too much. That's too much. No one's going to code that. I don't know. Tell me, what do you think? Let me know. Why do you think we're not, or that we are in a simulation? I'd be really interested to hear. madamestrangeways@gmail.com. So that's the first paranormal explanation. Another paranormal explanation is, of course, that it was a haunted house. Perhaps you weren't meant to go inside. Perhaps, like a previous story that I've shared, I think like the Crooked Cottage episode, perhaps if you had gone inside, we would have never heard from you again. I think is what I meant to say. And who knows where you'd be? Maybe you'd be in an alternate universe. Maybe you would have been involved in the esoteric nonsense that I mentioned earlier, the evil occultic stuff that some rando was doing in that house before you showed up. Who knows? We'll never know. But it's possible, because guess what? There are several supernatural stories of houses disappearing. So we're going to start here with CJ's weblog. CJ's weblog. I wonder when this was updated that we were still calling it a weblog instead of just a blog. What year was this? Looks like 2011-esque. 2011-ish. Yeah, that's fair. I guess we were probably still calling them web blogs instead of just blogs back then. So CJ, if you're listening, shout out. This is great. CJ apparently wrote a book named Spectral Suffolk, which is about ghost stories of the county in Suffolk and the United Kingdom, in England specifically. So apparently in that book, he talks about some of these stories, specifically one that happens in Ruffham Green, and that's spelled rough, like R-O-U-G-H, not like the dog sound, ruff, ruff, like R-O-U-G-H-A-M. When there's like a ham at the end of a town in England, you just say So Ruffham, I believe, Green. So here's what here's what CJ has to say. We've all heard of haunted houses, but who has ever heard of a house that is a haunt? Which is such a good, strong sentence. Yet for over a century, this is exactly what has been occurring on the stretch of road between Ruffham Green and Bradfield St. George. Our story begins in 1860 when a Mr. Robert Palfrey was out in the fields on a warm June evening. This is good. I need to get this book. What is this book called? Spectral Suffolk. And that's like Suffolk again. That's how they say things there. It's strange, it is. Here we go. Our story begins in 1860 when a Mr. Robert Palfrey was out in the fields on a warm June evening, putting the finishing touches on a haystack, as you do. He shivered as the evening suddenly grew chilly, and then was shocked to suddenly see a large red brick house with gardens in full bloom where there had been no house a moment before. The next sighting was in 1912 and happened to the great-grandson of Mr. Palfrey, Mr. James Cobold, when riding on a pony trap alongside the village butcher. I don't even know what the words that I just read. While riding on a pony trap, unclear, alongside the village butcher George Waylett. I guess you just go riding around with butchers in 1912. I don't know. On pony traps. Both were startled by a sudden cool breeze and drop in temperature, along with a whooshing noise suggestive of air being displaced. The pony reared in panic, and the butcher was thrown to the ground. Any thought of helping him vanished from young James's mind as he saw a great 3-story Georgian mansion, complete with grounds, where moments before that there had only been the fields. As he turned round to see what had become of George, the house was enveloped by a mist, and then suddenly not there. The butcher was unimpressed. Classic George the Butcher. He said, "That's the 3rd time I've seen that happen," he stated, and picked himself up out of the road. Again, classic George. Classic butcher activities. But if you want to learn more, this is available at Jerome with a J. Who's that? Jerome23.wordpress.com. I thought our name was CJ. CJ's Weblog is the title of the blog. And yet we're located at jerome23.wordpress.com. I don't know. Let me know. CJ, are you listening? Let me know. Who's Jerome? And why? What do you mean? I'm confused. All right, moving on to not a blog, not a law blog by Bob Blah Blah. Nope, we're moving on to the Norfolk Folklore Society, which is funny because, again, this is also in the United Kingdom. So you say Norfolk, right? Instead of like Norfolk, but then folklore. So is it actually the Norfolk Folklore Society? Is that how you pronounce it? Let me know. madamestrangeways@gmail.com. So this is the Norfolk Folklore or Folklore. That sounds like a different site. That sounds like, don't Google that. All right. This is a story about the Norfolk mansions that vanish into thin air. This story is by Stacia Briggs. Unclear. October 7th. Year not listed. We'll never know. Phantom houses are a rare but persistent phenomenon. In East Anglia, with eerie tales of grand mansions appearing and vanishing without a trace. So here we have more phantom mansions. I don't know why they're all in England so far, but we're going to continue. It goes on to say 2 of the most compelling accounts come from opposite ends of Norfolk. One in the isolated woodland of Tottington, and oh, it's just like such an English name. And another along the Acle Strait near Great Yarmouth. Okay. Tottington is one of Norfolk's lost villages, abandoned during the Second World War when the Ministry of Defense, spelled with a C, DEFENCE, I don't know where you thought the C went. Weird. Took over the land to create the Stanford Battle Area. Residents were forced to leave their homes, many believing they would return after the war. They never did. Today, Tottington remains off limits to the public. Its crumbling church and scattered ruins, the only reminders of a community that once thrived there. But in 2018, something unexpected appeared among the trees. A dog walker, familiar with the forested area, just like Kaycee, in the story at the beginning of the podcast, suddenly saw a mansion materialize before their eyes. That would be so scary. I would be like 911, or I guess I would be like 999 if that's where I was. Something's wrong. Please scan my brain. That would absolutely scare the crap out of me. At first, it was hazy, like a mirage, but the longer they looked, the more defined it became. An impressive building, solid and real, and then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, it was gone. Why did it do that? Was that like a mistake? Not a glitch. Like, oops, I was supposed to keep the house phantomed away. Oops. Then, almost 40 years earlier in 1979, another phantom house was seen, this time by Tina Clayton and her mother as they drove towards Great Yarmouth. As they neared the Vauxhall Holiday Park, we're going to go with that, a grand house appeared on the left. Framed by 3 poplar trees, it was lit from within, the glow of chandeliers casting golden lights across the windows. This is pretty. That's good imagery. Inside, people in elegant attire were dancing, a party in full swing. She and her mother commented on it at the time, wondering why they'd never noticed it before. But when they drove past in daylight, Kaycee, listen to this, the house was gone. Not just the house. There was no trace of the trees, no ruins, no foundations, nothing, just empty fields. Tina spent years watching that stretch of road, looking for some clue to what she had seen, but the house never appeared again. Dun dun dun. Okay, now to be clear, this is not about time slips, which is a different matter entirely, and I do not consider a time slip to be a glitch in the Matrix. I think time slip stories are a different type of story entirely, although I can see how there might be a Venn diagram and there's overlap, okay? But they're not entirely. It's not the exact same thing. So it's more of a time slip. A time slip being where someone slips through time accidentally. Doesn't mean to. There's some really interesting stories. We are not going down that rabbit hole today because I want to do a time slip story eventually. But here, I'll give you a tiny little tidbit, a little morsel that you'll have to ration out until that time. This is also from the Norfolk Folklore Society.co.uk. Listen to this. In Great Yarmouth in 1973, a man named Mr. Squirrel. So I don't like him. I don't like him. Me famously having a constant feud with all squirrels. He sounds like the squirrel spokesman. In Great Yarmouth, let's see what this squirrel guy is up to, because it's not going to be anything good. In Great Yarmouth in 1973, a man named Mr. Squirrel walked into a shop to buy envelopes for his coin collection. Nerd. We know he's a nerd. Nerd. Oh, the shop was strangely quiet. Unless you have a coin collection, then you're not a nerd. Unless you like being a nerd, in which case I'll allow it. The shop was strangely quiet. The assistant dressed in Victorian-style clothing. A week later, he returned only to find a modern store in its place, the assistant replaced by an elderly woman who had worked there for decades. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, we're leaving England. We have another story of a disappearing cottage. It's definitely not in the UK. Just kidding. It's in Scotland. We didn't go very far. We didn't go very far at all. We're still on the island of Great Britain. So here we go. This is on walkhighlands.co.uk. This is by Cameron McNeish. I'm not confident. Here we go. A few months ago, I wrote about some of the more curious occurrences I've come across in the hills of Scotland, which, I had to open that tab, but that's a tab for another day. That's a horse of another color. Maybe you know what? I don't know. What do you think? madamestrangeways@gmail.com. Do you want to hear specifically spooky stories from certain countries? Do you want to hear specifically Scottish scary stories? Do you want to hear specifically, I don't know, Tunisian scary stories? Certainly those exist. Let me know, madamestrangeways@gmail.com. All right, it continues. One of the stories mentioned Donald Watt, the erstwhile leader of the Lochaber Mountain Rescue Team, and a strange experience he had near Loch Mulardoch. As he descended the hill, he and his companion apparently saw a house with smoke coming from the chimney. As they approached the house, the view of it was hidden by a copse of trees. But when they passed the trees, they were astonished to see a crumpled ruin where a few minutes earlier they had spied what appeared to be a lived-in home. Where did it go? Why does this happen? Why is this so common in England? And I'm not finding as many of them elsewhere, but I've got a couple more. All right, I'm going to wrap it up with one more with, this is Japanese folklore. So this is the Mayoiga, the mysterious house you find when you're lost. This is actually, I found this on Uncanny Japan, which is a podcast or a YouTube channel. It's really interesting, so you should give it a listen. So a Mayoiga is a house that magically appears when you're lost in the forest or mountains. If you venture in, what will you find? What should you do? This is what I was saying earlier. I didn't read this before. If it's not clear, I do some light research on everything. I open up a bunch of tabs, and then my best episodes, I think, you can tell me if you disagree, are when I have not fully read everything, and I'm kind of learning with you. It's fun. It's interesting. So in Japanese folklore, a Mayoiga refers to a lavish or well-kept but abandoned house found in remote parts of the mountains or similar wilderness. Now, Kaycee, that's kind of what your cabin situation was, right? It was like out in the woods. I mean, it's not the mountains. Maybe it was. I don't know. Were there mountains? But it's similar wilderness is around. Come on. All right, back to Japanese folklore. These maioiga are thought to be mysterious mansions that can, under the right circumstances, bring wealth to their visitors. It's also said that these lavish dwellings are presented to you, and you are allowed to take one item from them, like a cup or a trinket or a painting or even a cow. Wow. And that thing that you take will give you fortune and luck for the rest of your days. So, Kaycee, I really wish you had looked inside and stolen something, because it could have brought you fortune for the rest of your life. It's such a missed opportunity. Like, imagine taking something. Like I would also miss that opportunity, because there is not a world in which I walk into a strange home that is abandoned and take something. First of all, if it's appeared magically, or as if by magic, I'm certainly not taking something, because it's probably cursed. I'm not going to take anything. That's not happening. So that's the thing. You'll get punished, I'm sure, if you take more than one thing, right? Because if you take one thing, it's good. I think the implication is if you're greedy, if you steal more than one thing from the house, obviously maybe you will be cursed, right? I don't know. It's not explicit. It doesn't say. But if you take nothing, you also get nothing. But if you take just one thing, you get fortune for the rest of your life. There's something there. There's some sort of life lesson. There's something there. Just take what you need, and that's it. Take what you need, and that's it. All right, I thought this was going to be a shorter episode. I think I say this every episode. But this in particular, I thought, there's no way I can yap for almost an hour. That would be impossible. This is a short story. There's not much here. Wrong. So here we are. Kaycee, I hope that you got some entertainment from listening to me, like I said, yap for almost an hour about your story. Thank you again for sharing that story with me. And I'm sorry that you guys got scared. I'm sorry that happened to you, but also it is a cool story. I feel like that's a cool story. I feel like people are jealous and they want their own cool, scary story. So hopefully it didn't scare you too much. But I really appreciate you sharing it with me. And if anyone listening, if you have any kind of unexplained story, even if you think it might technically be defined as a glitch in the matrix, I still want to read it. So email it to me at madamestrangeways@gmail.com. I can't wait to read it. Remember that you can feel afraid and not be in danger. You're safe here with me. Probably. Thank you for joining me for more true strange stories of the unexplained. Now, I'm running a one madam show here, so please do me a strange solid and follow the podcast, or leave me a rating on Apple or Spotify, and maybe even join the Patreon at patreon.com/madamestrangeways for bonus content. Madame Strangeways is produced and narrated by me, Madame Strangeways. Theme music is by Marina Ryan at marinamakes.co. Cover art is by Andrea Chiselle Roldan at Cult of Teddy on Instagram. Every strange story is shared with the permission of the author. You can submit your own true strange story to madamestrangeways@gmail.com, or check out the website madamestrangeways.com. See you soon, she said ominously.